I am super, super duper excited to have today's guest. And her name is Melissa. She's a social entrepreneur, community, and ecosystem builder. And she's a founder of Strive with Me. Melissa, thank you so, so, so much for being here today.
Honestly, many thanks for having me. I think I'm probably equally, if not more excited to just see you on this new journey. We've known each other for a little while, seen you in different lights, and working on many different amazing projects. So I'm really excited to be a part of this new venture you're on.
Thank you. Obviously, I'm a big fan of yours. I have a lots of questions. But before we get started, I love asking this question. So my first question is, how do you describe yourself as a human, and what is a fun fact that most people don't know about you?
Yes, I think that's a great question, because I think that we almost don't take the time to give people the space to identify whatever they want to identify with. And now it's always great to see what kind of gems comes out. So for me, as you say, I very much value being a social entrepreneur. I think that really drives a lot of what I do and kind of demonstrates how I think, like very business and goal oriented, but also thinking a lot about others. I'm honored and privileged to be a community leader in the startup space, working in the community development space, and like really immersing myself in the social change space. So that's really exciting. I also really identify as a personal development nerd, which I'm sure we're going to get into later on because I just love learning and love learning about people, myself. And I think that's a big thing. And the last thing is I identify as a striver, someone that's always looking to learn and grow, and do more.
Always looking to learn and grow more. So, what's a fun fact about you?
So in the early days of what is now Strive with Me, I actually wrote an article about how in when I was like 9 years old, I actually decided that I wanted to make a difference in the world. So the fun fact is, I kind of knew that I wanted to make a difference some way, and that I knew I would figure it out somehow. But at 9 years old, I was lying in my grandmother's living room and couldn't sleep, and was thinking and contemplating of all the ways that I could make a difference and what that difference looked like. And at 9 years old, I felt like the people that made the most difference that I was exposed to was like Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. And I was like, oh, I got it. I want to make a difference at the caliber of like these great people. And they were all mentioned in history books. So that's how I'll know that I made a significant difference if I was mentioned in a history book.
Oh my god, I love that. At 9 years old, you wanted to make a significant impact so much so that you'll be in the history book.
Like, I had no idea what that meant or what I would do. I'm actually turning 29 next Friday. So it's been like 20 years later, and I have a better idea what that looks like. But by the end of the day, I think we're all still trying to figure it out.
Well, happy almost birthday to you as well.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I have a very similar story. For me, my benchmark was when I die, I wanted to be on the breaking news and the people will talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was my definition of being a huge person.
Oh, okay. Got it. Yeah. I'm curious to see if that's like a cultural related thing. Because did you grew up in Japan, right?
Yeah, I did.
Ah, interesting. Because here in America, like being mentioned in the news when you die, yes, it's significant, but most of the time it's like because you're a victim of a crime or something. I don't know. Like I guess
Yeah.
if you mentioned a memorial, then you're mentioned in the news or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope it's more of like you doing so many great things. I think it's time for us to re-update how we measure our impact and our contribution.
Absolutely. Oh my god, this is so funny already, and I am already hyped about this conversation. So, yeah, let's dive in deeper. So, as you mentioned, we actually met in this Facebook group called the PDN, Personal Development Nerd, and yes, we are personal development junkie, as we describe it as that. Obviously, you're ambitious from 9 years old, and I can imagine. And how did your personal development journey started for you?
I think it's interesting because personal development, there's so many elements of that as like as we go throughout life. I think I can like recall or have been told of like memories of things that I have worked on now that contributes to my like personal development journey. So we share a lot about like PDJ, which is personal development journey on Strive. So for me, the consciousness part of the journey is more so like watching a lot of other people I grew up with. So I'm a child of Vietnamese refugees. So learning that struggle of seeing how people overcome intergenerational trauma, overcome great deals of adversity and assimilating in a brand new country and really striving to provide for their family and their child, me. And so I think like that really helped me understand the value of hard work, helped me understand like that, like making sacrifices and really building on this journey so that not only you but also other people around you can benefit from your work. Also going back to things like ever since I was young, I asked a lot of questions. Like my mom would tell me all the time of how much I was such a curious and talkative child. I was that child that every teacher was like, yeah, every teacher conference, Melissa talks a lot. She has a lot of questions. And I've been blessed to be able to turn that feedback into like a great strength of mine, which is asking questions. So like back to the story, my mom would tell me how she would ask all like I would ask so many questions that my parents will pretend to fall asleep so that they can avoid answering them.
Oh,
And
wow.
I'm like, okay. So you kind of get a sense of like the level of curiosity and interest in people and how things work. And I think over time I've developed that skill, but really it's more so like the consciousness of watching what's happening around me, and the people around me living their lives like facing these adversities and really feeling a sense of desire to not only speak up for people that may not feel empowered to use their voice, be able to ask other people questions, and be able to also to turn that inwards and ask myself really hard questions and really start thinking about like, hey, like how are people living their lives and is that what I want? If the answer is no, how can I work on myself to ensure I don't kind of go down the same path?
Hmm. Being able to have a curiosity, I think that something we take it for granted,
Yes.
especially nowadays. People are like, do not question. There's so much status quo is involved in this world, and you didn't stop questioning.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of really great points, and it's a very relevant point now, right? In terms of like really understanding like group thinking and how why we as people lean towards group thinking and go towards the popular opinion, but also what are the dangers of that because we can also lose our identity being a part of the group. We don't question things because we just like already accepted it from like a higher level, but also really understanding like why we're doing that. So I think it's really important that we really are self-aware, and that self-awareness involves a level of consciousness to make these decisions and be proactive on those decisions.
Be proactive on those decisions. Yeah, I wonder that all the time. How much of our life are proactive,
Yeah.
right? Now, especially everything is so tip of our finger, information is right there.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing because I can speak for myself growing up as an Asian American. There's always like this path that my parents and my community and in a way society really primes for, which is like you grow up, you go to school, you go to college, you get married, you have kid, you work in whatever job it is for 50 years and then you retire and then you die. And if you find a job you like, great. If not, that's fine. Like that's part of the system, right? Like not everyone has that privilege and that capability to do work in a job that they are super, super passionate about. Which is why entrepreneurship and startups is such on the rise because people are like, no, I really want that. And I think that a lot of times once we kind of sober up from the story and the narratives and really the limiting beliefs that so many of us are taught and fed and are restricted by, then we can start peeling away from that look inwards and really ask ourselves, what do I want? What is it that I need? And how can I really heal myself from whatever? Because I think everyone experiences some level of trauma and adversity and things like that. And the more we don't address those things, the more it holds us back. So a part of that sobering experience allows us to really focus on the consciousness and allows us to really pivot our thinking, take more ownership in our own lives, and be able to make those conscious decisions, whether that's within our own self, how we engage with other people, or even the impact we make in the world.
I love that you brought up healing, which is a great segue into my next question. So, I had an honor of sharing my story through Strive with Me. So, thank you so much for the
I think
opportunity.
we were the one that was honored, but thank you. Like we both can take this compliment.
We'll both receive. How's that?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that writing, it was such a profound healing experience for me. We underestimate the power of writing, power of reflecting, power of journaling so much. And it was such a healing moment for myself. So, Strive with Me, it started from online publication and now moving towards a new direction. But before we going into that new direction, I want to ask you, what is your relationship with writing?
Yeah. For many, many years, I had such a fear and aversion towards writing. And this is a little context. So, Strive with Me started out as a personal development blog called Pursuit of Passion. I just wanted to like share my journey as I make all these realizations in the hopes that it could help someone. As I grew, I wanted to share these stories and I wanted to kind of not only log it, but share it so that someone else can really hopefully read it and feel like they're not alone. I think a lot of times personal development, it's so personal that we feel like we're the only ones that are experiencing imposter syndrome, that we're the only one that's feeling loneliness, that we're like having an identity crisis, especially now with everything that's going on. I think a lot of us are. But when it comes to writing, we're able to really express ourselves and really had to push through that fear and really practice and remind myself why I'm doing this is that I know someone out there feels like this, like feels really lonely, feels really struggling because I'm not, like a super successful like a founder that's making like millions, billions of dollars and have like all this tremendous amount of achievement in my on my resume or my LinkedIn or whatever it is. I know someone else feels that way. So to be able to connect to them and to be able to ensure that they're not feeling alone and be able to share these experiences so that other people can learn, right? Like I think for me, the biggest way I learn is through other people. When it comes to writing, I had to really overcome that experience and really keep pushing and keep practicing and find my voice. I think it was really hard for me to kind of learn to have fun with writing and not be so judgmental. I think like all of us have an inner critic or a voice in the back of our minds that said like, oh no, like that's not good enough, you're not good enough, no one's gonna understand, like you took too long to say this, you didn't do this right. And so being able to like lean in and be like, hey, that's okay. That's okay if it's not all perfect. Like, I'm not writing an academic paper. I am not going to pretend like I don't know it all. And I'm not going to pretend like I know it all. So it's okay because it's about that journey. In a way, I built that Stride brand to saying, like, hey, if you don't know it all, that's perfectly fine. Wherever you at or on your journey, like, share that because other people are striving to be where you are now, right? Because we're all on different journeys and at different stages. So being able to create that space for myself to have fun and explore and be vulnerable, like some of the most like personal like me specific articles were the one that resonated with people the most when I talked about imposter syndrome, when I talked about depression and having like suicidal thoughts and things like that. People were like, yo, I still read about this. And I was like, wait, I posted about like a couple years ago, why are you reading about it now? And you already read that. So I think the power of writing is something that a lot of people really underestimate, but really it's the power of storytelling. I think that's something that which I can completely go on a rant about, which I won't, but it really shows the power of storytelling. And by you sharing your story with us, and we're able to share with other people not only got to know you, like people that already knew you but didn't know the side of you. You were also able to heal and really reflect on what that experience was like, but also someone that haven't had the privilege to know you yet get to learn a little bit about you and feel that connection, even though you two have not maybe not have met online or even in person.
Love that. The power of storytelling. It's such such a gift. And the people get to see themselves in those writing and like really feel the connection and oh my god, this is my story. Thank you so much for articulating because some people may have not even realized their own experience. So, yeah, thank you for sharing your vulnerable journey and how incredible is that people are still reading your piece after a few years. That's so amazing.
I'm still taken back. We hosted a panel recently on anti-racism, and one of the panelists, which I had a call because we're looking to bring him back, he says, "Hey, oh my gosh, I forgot to tell you, you set off something in my family," and I was like, "Oh my god, what does that mean? Like, I hope that's okay." And then he goes, "No, no, no, no. Like, remember I told you about this incident with my family? Well, they saw that I was on your panel, and we talk about racism, and then we in our family had to have the conversation about racism within our family. We started bringing people together. People were crying, and I was about to cry in the call just hearing this. And it's just to see the impact of having these really uncomfortable conversations, but creating that safe space to talk about things that we need to talk about, right? Things like anti racism, things like imposter syndrome, things like mental health, and things like that. People are able to better articulate, and with this new direction where they're able to have the tools and resources, and people to reach out to for them to continue to do the deep work and do a lot more like deep reflections and work on themselves.
That is just so beautiful. Oh my god.
I was crying earlier. I was about to cry earlier.
I would be crying as well.
I'm just happy it turned out well.
Oh my god. Imagine, right? Sometimes what you think it's not turning out well could possibly turn into something magical a few years down the road. So, yeah, it started the ripple effect.
I think that's one of the craziest experience for me with Strive is, for me, it's very much, I want to like, I'm curious. I want to have these conversations. Do other people want to have the conversations with me? And then people share the feedback of like, this was one of like the best panel I've been to on this topic, or this was really helpful for me. Like I gave away the tools. Like I got to connect with someone that was a writer or an event participant or speaker, and we're able to work on something. I think that for me still takes me back, right? And as a community builder, all you're thinking about is how to better the experience for them in the short amount of time you have with them, right? Because I do a lot of events, I do a lot of programs, I do a lot of like networking and meetings, and help people find great opportunities like this. But to hear the effects of it happening afterwards is so it's like the magical part of the role and the experience that I don't know if I'll ever get used to, and I hope that I never do, because like I think that's the so exciting to be able to resonate with people and in a way that truly moves them and helps them move that needle and or like reframe or think things differently.
Yeah, and I said I was going to ask you earlier about the new direction of this drive with me, and I think we're already diving into the conversation. I started noticing more of the shift after the quarantine and COVID-19 started, and you've curated so many beautiful and powerful conversations. If you, for those people who are listening, if you want to check it out, it's also in the YouTube channel for Strive Conversations, so please do go check it out. And some of the conversations are anti-racism amongst Asian Pacific Island community and the compassionate leadership in the anti-racism. I said anti-aging. That's hilarious. Anti-aging is a
Also
real
have
thing.
compassion in that too. Yes.
Totally.
Ageism is a part of D&I. Like
Yep.
we shouldn't like um, judge people on that.
The thing, ageism is another deep topic that we get to explore down the way. Yeah, so I got to participate last night, and one of the really, really powerful thing that you shared was I love jumping into uncomfortable questions. Yes, 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 and more yes, because we hesitate that from asking ourselves the uncomfortable question. So I want to ask you, what are some uncomfortable questions that you asked yourself lately?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you mentioned since the quarantine, there's been like a shift, right? Like you and I have been in touch and keep up with each other's growth and all the things that we're working on. And so before, right, when you first started writing for Strive, it was very much like share your stories about personal development, professional development, and social impact, which was a more passive like publication, which was the kind of like vibe and feel, right? Now it's like since the quarantine, I really took the time to like, hey, let me look inwards and really like dive into like, how can I make this impactful? And since then, I really figured out like, you know what? I really want to make personal development and social change more accessible to busy people. And what that looks like is because, especially for like young people, we are doing so many things. There's so many things going on in our world, in our work, and in the actual world around us that we live in. We almost don't have the space to work on ourselves, ask us these uncomfortable questions, which I'm going to share with you, like some of the things that have been really throwing me for a loop, but really to be able to have that safe space to explore ourselves and learn and really get down to the nitty gritty. I think uncomfortable questions are a great place to start because they that friction allows you to sharpen your ideas, sharpen your understanding and sense of self, but also allows you to like dig deeper than you ever did before. Like there's a reason why certain topics are really emotionally charged, that they're really triggering for us, and things like that, because there's so much that we haven't unpacked yet and or we haven't really acknowledged fully. And so like some of the uncomfortable questions that really sparked for me, especially since this quarantine, that where I am in my personal development journey is one, with the rise in the Black Lives Matter movement, I think we're having so many, for many, well, for anyone, it's really an uncomfortable conversation about race and anti-racism, but also it asks us, what can we do? Like, what is our role, and how can we contribute to a more inclusive and better world? And so when the rise of the protest, I really had to ask myself, because this whole time I think a lot of people like had their identities really questioned. And so as I mentioned, like how I identify myself as a human, I identify myself as a community leader. As a community leader, what am I going to do, not just to address it with my community, but also like help create a space for them to get what they need, to access the resources they need, and have journey that's going on inside their hearts and inside their minds. And so for me, I had to ask myself, what can I do to contribute to better the world around me? Like how can I, with the resources I have, with the positioning I have, with the knowledge and skill sets, and access I have, could do to contribute? And I think that's an answer, that's a question that we're gonna like I'm always gonna want to answer and try to figure out and refine as I learn and grow as a person, as a young professional, and as a like citizen of the world. Another question that really threw me in the loop was so that is part of like the social change part, right? So we're going to the personal development and the lovey-dovey side because I'm like a huge hopeless romantic. On the other
Yes.
side, I know, right? Disney messed us all up. Um, but how can I learn to love myself the way I so easily, in many ways, try to love others, and how I want them to love me back, right? Like I think like for a lot of us, like I'll speak for myself because I don't want to assume where anyone's at in their journey. For me, I had a really hard time like really loving myself and seeing my worth and setting those boundaries and building really healthy, strong relationships that I knew I wanted and was hoping and striving for. And so after a series of relationships, I was like, you know what? I don't think I'm getting what I want and need because I'm not giving that to myself. And so I had to take a lot of time and do a lot of reflection. Like that's why you see so many journals around, because I'm just like jotting it all down and working it through of like, what is it like, why is it so easy for me to want to love and understand and be compassionate to other people, but why is it so hard for me to do that to myself? And then I start thinking of that in a romantic aspect, like how can I love myself the way I try to love other people and other partners, and how do I want them to love me back? Like I wouldn't want to be with someone that if I'm hard on myself and they're like if I had a really bad day and I needed to like either write an article or do some extra work after hours, I wouldn't want to be with someone that says like, yeah, you need to get up and do it. You're so lazy. Like, what's wrong with you? And beat yourself down. So why do I do that to myself? And I will want to love someone like for me, I will want to be in a relationship where I can love someone, be there for them in hard times, and be able to celebrate great times. So why don't I celebrate achievements, right? Like we start out with like, I know a lot of people get really antsy about compliments. Like I've had people come up to me, it's like, hey, how do you feel about compliments? I was like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, I thought you did a really good job about like this, and I really like this about you. I didn't know your attitude towards it. And I was like, why would I be upset if you want to take time to appreciate me? We all want to be appreciated. Why is that a hesitation? And I think that reveals like a whole nother, like we can go into a tangent about that, but I don't want to take up too much of your time on that. But I think
Oh
that
my God, no, please.
yeah, no, I think we need to be able to appreciate and love ourselves the way we do that for others. And then also, however, we want someone to love us, we need to do that. Not only is it good and healthy and nurturing and healing and loving for us to have that love, but it also shows us, like, hey, this is what a healthy relationship looks like. And if we can have a healthy relationship with ourselves, how can we do that with someone else? And that's like that for me was why I felt like I was so unsatisfied with relationships, because I felt like, and I'll steal this quote from Daniel Sloss, which is an amazing comedian that did like one of my favorite comedy skits. It's on Netflix. It's called it's Daniel Sloss After Dark. It's the second episode. It's called Jigsaw. We employ other people to love us when we don't know how to do that ourselves. And whether that's personal or in like business and leadership, if we don't know what we want and we expect other people to do that, we're never going to be satisfied. We're never going to be happy because it's not enough, because we don't know what enough looks like.
Ugh, that is so good.
I know that like was like the longest way to answer your question, but I hope that was valuable too.
Oh my god, that was such a beautiful gem. Like, gems, the plural, so many you just dropped. Wow.
Thank you for that compliment and recognizing it.
And thank you for receiving it. Oh wow. I'm speechless. I'm speechless. But that's so true though, because we seek for external things so much, and it's like, why don't you love me? But if you're not loving yourself the way you want others to love you, and yeah.
Exactly. And so it could be anything, right? Like if we're not happy with ourselves, we depend on others, whether that's a person like loving us, whether that's family that maybe we don't have a good relationship, but we want them to love us, right? Like a parent. Or like we can start participating in like self-destructive or sabotaging behavior, like getting like addiction, like going into like wanting release. So we like depend on like drugs, alcohol, sex, any number of things that may not be healthy in moderation, because we're just constantly wanting to fill this void, right? Or even food. Like I know when I'm really sad, I try to fill the void with food, lots of chocolate, and so
Ice cream and cookies.
yes, yes, exactly. So by learning what we need, and I think that's such a big part of personal development. And my journey is like learning what I need and what I want, and not be so shameful of it. I think we guilt ourselves and we attach so much shame for what we want. And so, therefore, when we want to ask for it, whether that's asking our partner to love us and respect us and show us compassion, we don't get it. Whether that's asking for that raise because we believe it. We're not confident because we don't believe we earned it. Or even like setting boundaries with friends. Like if we don't believe we deserve like me time, or we deserve to like go spend our time, energy, and bandwidth on things that fulfill us, we're not going to be able to say no. Like we're just going to keep like people pleasing because we need them to validate us instead of saying that we can validate us ourselves. They are just compliments to our the contributing to our lives rather than being like the sole source of our happiness and everything like that.
Again, more and more good gems. I love it. So it really comes down to compassion and empathy, right? And I was going to actually ask this question in regards to your professional life, but I kind of want to shift that.
Whatever
Okay,
you want to ask.
awesome. Thank you. On the professional setting, like go for your conversation with the Strive, and whenever you do the moderation, the way you listen to people, it's so attentive and intentional, and it's so beautiful because we always, I don't want to say we always, but a lot of people, including myself, always have like, what can I say? What advice can I give? So it's not, it's a half listening, right? And now that you're talking about really understanding self as well as the others, so how do you listen in an empathetic and a compassionate way, both for yourself and for others, and how can people cultivate that as well?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think that's a really important question, especially now when we're in so many heated and emotionally charged conversations. We're not really listening to each other. I really appreciate that you took notice. It's something that I've consciously worked on, right? Because I've received that feedback like, hey, you're not listening to me. I don't feel seen. I don't like I feel understood. Like, and I saw that and I was like, I don't want to make people feel that way. So what can I do to ensure that that doesn't happen anymore, whether it's in that relationships but also in all relationships. One, we have to take a look at like, why do we uh, jump so quickly to answer? Why are we like thinking of an answer while the other person's talking, so we're not really paying attention, we're just trying to like one up them or like trying to show up? It's because we want validation, like both sides, right? Anyone I think you ask can tell you that really by the end of the day, as human beings, we want to feel seen, we want to feel heard, and we want to feel appreciated. So understanding that that's what I want, that's what you want as my conversation partner, I'm able to acknowledge that that is what we need to build a better relationship, right? So listening is such a big part of that, and how you can apply this in your life is when you're in a conversation and someone is saying something, really take that time to like be still with yourself and try to listen, to understand, not to react, not to judge, or not to combat at them, whatever it is. Like no matter if you're just talking about the weather and it couldn't affect you either other way, or like having like a really heated conversation. Like I think for us now, we need to have more compassionate conversations because they're really uncomfortable. We need to show compassion in those uncomfortable conversations more than ever. And that really starts with listening. So really taking that time to listen, to understand what it, not only what they're saying, but who they are. I've been guilty, right, of jumping to conclusions and being like, oh, what do you mean by that? That was an attack on me. Clearly, you meant like to hurt me by saying that, right? And I've been there where I was just like very like aggressive in like my response. And I had to take a step to be like, wait a minute, before I make any assumptions of their intentions, what the impact of their intentions and their words are, let me not assume malice. Let me not assume that they're trying to hurt me, but instead, let me listen with curiosity. Let me combat at them with, like, hey, I don't understand what you mean by that. Can you clarify that? Like now we're using like words that I think, especially in the conversations that I've been having, especially about like anti-racism and things like that, there's so many words and jargons that people are using, especially in the like social change and advocacy space, that people we assume that we know. right? And this might be like a very American mindset of like, we assume that phrases and words, and I think it's idioms that we use, that it's universal, that everyone uses them. So when someone says like, wait, what do you mean? Can you explain to me like this word? Can you define this? Or like, I understood it this way. Is that what you meant? Like asking those questions from a place of curiosity allows them to like explain and really think about it. Because when we're talking just to react to one another, we're not really thinking, we're not really present, and we're not really connecting. So taking that time to ask those questions, get a better understanding of what they're trying to say to you and ask you, and then be able to then you can respond thoughtfully and show up as your true self now that you better understand, rather than you're just like reacting because they're saying something that is hurtful or like confusing or whatever it is. So I think really understanding that both of us, right, the mutual commonalities that we're human and we want to be seen, heard, and appreciated, listen to understand, and try not to make assumptions. Like listen with curiosity so that we can show up in the conversation, being present and have a pleasant conversation, whatever the topic would be.
So beautiful. Listen to understand and with curiosity. Yeah, and it helps us really be present with each other. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think all of us can start really implementing and practicing that compassionate and empathetic listening and to really be with each other. So, again, thank you so much for sharing.
I
Thank you
really
for
appreciate
asking.
it.
Sorry to cut you off.
Oh no, please
That's
don't.
a big listening no-no. Try not to cut off. I'm still working on that.
And sometimes it comes from like a genuine excitement and appreciation, right? Like, oh my God, me too. So, yeah,
Sometimes curiosity kind of like takes over.
I love it. So, I have a two more question for you, and one of the question before the last one is, what does strive mean to you, and what does it look like when everybody in the world is striving?
Mm, that's such a good question. Thank you. Uh, so for me, striving is the idea that we're constantly learning and growing and striving to be our best self, right? I think in our hearts, when we're not running at a million miles per hour, when we're not like trying to avoid being attacked and all these things, we're really like, we all want to be this version of ourselves, like which is the best version of ourselves. And we're all trying to figure out how to get there. And so for me, striving is always about learning and growing. And that includes making mistakes. I think like I write a lot about the pathway to success on Strive. When people talk about success, naturally you also talk about failure. And I do believe that failure is a part of success, not the end of it. I think that a lot of people see like failure as like, oh, like everything's gone, like everything's ruined, like it's tainted, there's no way. It's like, no, actually, that's how you learn. Like that's how like babies and toddlers and infants, when they're learning to walk, if they fall and fall down, you don't like throw out the whole baby. Like you just like like it's okay. It's okay, keep going. Like that's how you learn and grow. And you're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna stumble. Like that's totally cool. Like you're gonna be supportive. So you wanna do that to yourself as you're learning, as you're growing, that if you start a company and it doesn't work out, if you ask for a promotion and you got rejected, like how can you take that experience to learn and grow, and how can you learn from other people? I think for me that's one of my favorite parts about Strive, is being able to learn from so many different people, and then you yourself make the conscious choice of how you go about it. How do I now, Melissa, being exposed to meeting so many people and learning so many things, choose to go about my journey and choose to go about this? It's a constant journey and experience, because we're always presented with new information, like you mentioned earlier. Like now, like everything's attached to our like so the world is attached to our phone and we can access so many things. And because like new information is always coming out, whether that's science, whether that's like human experiences, I feel like you can learn so much from both. We need to be able to update ourselves. Like I tell this story about like how similar to how you update your devices, you want to do that software update for devices to ensure it works at like optimal capacity. You need to update yourself and update your like belief systems and mental models so that you can keep operating better. Because the more we hold on to old beliefs and old mindset, and you're seeing that a lot now more than ever, the more you hold on to that, the more that it's hindering your growth rather than propelling you forward. And so what that looks like in the real world is, if everyone strives to be their best self and are kind and gentle to themselves as they're going on this personal development journey, we're able to have people that are really truly happy, reaching self-actualization, living up to their potential, growing and being able to be the best version, as I said. And then in that journey, realizing our capabilities, our power, and then start asking ourselves, how can we help each other? I think for me, like, that social change is such a big part. I'm still like new to, like, I feel like I've been in the impact space, but like change is such a different vibe altogether. But like, start thinking like, how can I contribute to solving more problems? How can I help out my community, whether it's immediate community, whether that's like a regional community, or like another group of people in a different part of the world? How can I start solving world problems? But I think that, like, in order to do that, we need to be constantly learning and growing, and to be our best self, to be able to solve like larger and larger problems.
I could just keep talking to you all day, all night, and listen to you.
Thank you.
Seriously, I love it. We all get to really come into the space, and that comes from really acknowledging that we do make mistake, and when we do make mistake, can we learn from it? And like you mentioned, it is about the choice.
Yes, yes. And you can choose to learn from it and really dissect from it, or you can choose to let that be the end of your journey, or let that be the, like, the speed bump that you're stuck at. Or you can say like, okay, I'm just gonna roll with it and be like, okay, I learned from it. What can I, like, I experienced it, what can I learn from it, and how can I keep going and building that momentum?
How can we keep building the momentum? So I want to offer the people who are listening to the momentum. So for those folks who want to join the Strive conversation, join the community that you're creating, how can people find out your work and your next event?
Sure. Thank you so much for providing that opportunity. And thank you to everyone that's listening. I know it's a lot of ranting. So you can always check out Strive With Me. Again, it's a platform that makes personal development and social change more accessible to busy people. You can check us out at strivewithme.com. We are also like on YouTube now. If you look up Strive With Me, hopefully we're still working on SEO, so you might do a little digging. But with Strive With Me, we do share recordings of our events if you can't make it in person, or you can't make it on Zoom, I should say. They're on there. So there's Strive Conversations, which is the event series that focuses on uncomfortable conversations on various topics relating to personal development, entrepreneurship, and social change. And I also did kind of like a personal series called Strive Reflections, which I'm just sharing like where I am in my journey, these thoughts on different things, and how to help people on their own Strive journey. So you can check us out at Strive With Me. If that resonates with you, please feel free to subscribe and check us out, and share our content if it really touches you. And if you find us on YouTube, if you like us, please like, comment, and subscribe, because that really helps us out. And we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and those conversations are so beautiful. And I, every time I participate, I learn so much. Thank you so much for creating that space, sharing your wisdom, and holding space for so many of us.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. I think that uh, that is the reason why I do the things I do, and I'm able to be blessed to connect with great people and create that space.
Again, I cannot thank you enough for your time and your love and your wisdom. After all these gems that you drop, I'm going to ask you one more thing. What is a call to action you want to share with the audience?
I think I just want to take this time, because we've kind of talked about like uncomfortable conversations and things like that. I think this would be a great time to invite the audience and the rest of the world to start asking yourself really hard and uncomfortable questions, and give yourself the permission and space to really explore and heal through that. right? Like whatever that question is, whatever those questions that you've been avoiding for so long, like a lot of like topics could be relating around any trauma that you've experienced. And if you have experienced trauma, please speak to a mental health professional. I am not one. I'm always happy to listen, but I am not as trained as I would like to be able to help guide you through that. So there's so many resources out there, whether that's self-love, whether that's like your professional career, whether that's your personal development, your role in social change and advocacy. Take the time to ask yourself these questions and be gentle with yourself as you're trying to figure it out. Really give yourself the space to explore and play, and be uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? Being uncomfortable is how we're able to learn and grow, and our friction only sharpens us if we allow it rather than dulls us. So I really invite everyone to ask yourself those hard questions. Journal and write journal and write it down. If you want to share your story of what you came from that, we would love to feature that on strivewithme.com. So hit me up. You can always reach me at contributor at strivewithme.com. That's my email. We would love to see what the world will be like if more people dove into those hard questions rather than run away from them.
Yes. No, let's dive in. Let's dive in all these uncomfortable questions. So again, thank you so much for spending time with me and the audience. Thank you for being you, Melissa.
Thank you for creating this space. Thank you for amplifying so many creative voices that are striving to share their work with the world and hopefully add more joy and positivity into it.